to a technical error, the recording of this Synod 2024 visioning session for the ECC was started late and is incomplete. We extend our sincere apologies to the facilitator and all the ECC delegates. 2 weeks before Synod, Rod Otrembiak was asked to facilitate a visioning conversation for the future of the ECC. He constructed an agenda, activities, and a survey designed to help prioritize aspects of our ECC identity. Unfortunately, this recording of Rob's session at the 2024 Synod is missing this context, specifically Rob's introduction of himself and his learnings about Benedictine welcoming, a centering activity based on Lectio Divina, borrowed from Ecclesiastes 4, verses 9 through 12, in which it can be summarized as, in our toil, 2 working together are better than 1, but 3 working together is a cord not easily broken. Rob followed this with a bridge building activity. We're all Benedictines, at least a little, in which he asked us to consider, in terms of stability, to what group or communities are we committed? Conversion, what is something in your personal or spiritual development on which you have made progress? In terms of self-reform, what is one step, support, or method you rely on for personal or spiritual growth? And finally, in terms of nonviolent peacemaking, how do you stand apart from violence and oppressive cultures? You might want to take a few minutes to pause this video and answer these questions for yourself. Rob then asked us to do an initial sharing of these reflections with a neighbor. Zoom attendees were placed into breakout rooms for that discussion. Then Rob proceeded to share the results of the survey and asked the delegates to identify whether we, as a communion, need to apply effort to define, clarify, or share the topics of the survey. The response to this went a little off topic. However, at the risk of some confusion, I have retained much of the ensuing discussion in the hope that it helps illustrate priorities, at least for some of our delegates. We join the in-progress discussion at this point.
And I'm sorry if it wasn't clear in how it was stated. This was a ranking, not a rating, right? Everything can be important on a relative scale. So the question was, what do we need to focus on sooner than later? Is it sharing something, defining it, or clarifying it? Or have we done sufficiently with that? We don't need to address it right now. Or is it something that we need to do? We just don't need to do it immediately because maybe there's a precursor to it. And then to answer the second question, through the planning committee and conversations, we threw out a number of things, and without trying to overwhelm people, put into the survey those things which people were raising the most frequently as concerns. We also looked at some of the foundational documents, things that were specifically called out and said, this is who we are. And I put those in there to make sure that people were aware or that they could express any concern about being aware, knowing what it means, and so on. Sure.
So I think that needs more clarification, Rob.
Thank you. Go
So
ahead.
this session was a late add-in. It was added in about 6 or 7 weeks ago. And I'll speak for you, Pablo, and then you can grab the mic and correct me if I'm wrong. That it's his event, as we all know, it's Bishop's event, and that he wanted us to do some visioning. So only in the last 2 weeks was Rob invited in to think about what would a visioning session look like that you can do appropriately in 3 hours. And really, Rob, you and Pablo designed the questions, these questions. We didn't really get input very much on the original content. You gave a lot of possibilities and then you refined. So that's the answer, Maggie. And I think what you're pointing to is, are these our questions? I don't know. If we did some process to design them, maybe they would be different, but they are the questions we're going to work with now, because they're the ones that, you know, Rob and Pablo, through some discernment, talk with some of the leadership in the communion, thought this was a good starting point. So I think that's the generosity of spirit we can bring, which is we're just using this as a starting point. And I hope
Thank
that's
you.
helpful, that where this came from is it in a very short window from a wonderful, open-hearted bishop and a really good consultant who was doing his best to respond quickly.
Thank you, Trish. And I can also offer some added clarification that through conversations with the bishops and with the planning committee, and like I said, referencing founding documentation, I created drafts, which then I shared back to the committees and asked for feedback and input on so that I could then go and reiterate. So yes, you're right that this is what we have. Why a number of 100% is being reflected of people saying I didn't put that as number one, that I have no answer for, because as I said, the data was online and I downloaded that. It should have paid for it. Thank you for your contribution.
And I just wanted to say, I do hope my question was heard generously because I intended to ask it generously. Sorry, I was feeling like I was shouting at you, which I didn't want to do. I hope my question was received generously because I intended to ask it generously. It was about, we suddenly land in these questions that I don't have a frame of reference for and have a hard time engaging.
Sure.
And so just trying to locate myself within the conversation was difficult without knowing what.
Right. Because I could have provided better context. Thanks.
Yeah.
Okay. Is there another question? Right here. Not for my sake, but for everyone else's sake.
I'm just confused about the numbers. So when you say 100% answered question number one, right?
Mm-hmm.
Number two, what did they answer?
Okay.
I mean,
so
what's that 89% represent?
okay, so my understanding of the ranking is that there were 4 options on each page, and you rank what do I think is the most pressing need as number 1.
Right.
Second most pressing need is number 2, 3, and 4, and so on. It was a forced ranking, right? So what I interpreted this to mean is that everybody thought that the first option was the number 1. When people are saying I didn't do that.
Yeah, it's hard to understand what the second one is then. If you had 100% as number 1.
91% agreed that that was number 2.
Oh, that was number 2.
Yeah. And so on. Hey, Mir.
This may help. We do a lot of survey sorts of things with my union. And when we do ranked choices, often we'll put them into a program. And I'm betting that what he briefly bought was a program that gave ranking to our 1, 2, 3, 4 and crunched the numbers that 1 got a higher weight than 2 got, than 3 got, than 4 got. And then it gave a final thing. I can't tell you how it came to 100, but I'd be willing to bet that the program that what we entered stuff into had a program that did a ranking based on our numbering and how many 1s and how many 2s and how many 3s. And that total, whatever was the highest total, is what it gave that to.
Thank you. So then we're at a decision point here then. We can continue to review these if you want, with a little bit of a grain of salt as far as whether the numbers are what the numbers are. But the next step would be the same anyway. And that is that, yes, Kate, did you have something to interject?
More people thought that the question on Trinitarianism was the most important, whether it was 100% or not. And then the same with the next one, which I can't see from here, but
The sacraments, yeah.
yeah. So ignore the numbers and just, I think, go with the
priority.
the ranking and
Yeah.
priority of people.
Okay, thank you, Kate. Yeah, so I was going to say we can proceed in that way. We're going to focus on all of these issues anyway, right? We're going to brainstorm them anyway. I was trying to find a way that we could start putting some timelines to some things, but that can be part of our brainstorming, right? We can say, this is an issue, this is a way we can go about it, and I think it needs to be in this timeline. We can just add that to our conversations at our table, and then we don't need to be hung up on what the numbers are. And I do apologize that the numbers are causing distress to people. Obviously, that is not my intention. Hopefully, we can look at the issues and do remember that we also had the opportunity to submit added issues if these were not in fact your issues, right? And so I think we have another question.
Rob, maybe I'm the only one who needs a clarification, but so we can't see the screen from here. Does this help at all? It might help me. There's 4 areas, and I heard what Kate said made a lot of sense to me. Is this correct? Our ECC identity, Trinitarian theology, 7 sacraments, and Catholicity.
Yes, in this page, yes.
And that's the way they fell in the
Right.
priorities in the order.
Trinitarian spirituality, that we are the body of Christ, was top. The sacraments and Eucharist, Catholicity and salvation, and that our theology is formed by the 7 ecumenical councils, the Bible, traditions, and the first millennium of the church. In that order. Okay. All right.
Yeah, I'm just looking for an easy way, conversationally as we go forward,
Yes.
that you can identify those areas so that
Okay.
we're not just mixing them, not a salad, but we know the different foods that are on the plate.
Right. And that was another, thank you very much. That was another challenge with putting this together and putting it together quickly is what is a definition of a what, right? And then do we all have agreement on what that word means? And I was very upfront with the committee. I'm like, we are not going to come to consensus on what all of these words mean in a week. So let's put some general things out there and then we'll talk about the specifics here in our tables, okay? Anything else? Okay. So in this group, we had our spirituality, that we are the body of Christ, the community of love and self-giving of our Creator, our Redeemer, and our Sanctifier. We had sacramental issues, especially the Eucharist, and that salvation is offered to all, and the formation of our theology, the sources of that. So we will be talking about what do we need to define, clarify, or share regarding that, and how could we begin to do so, okay? The next group, first of all, was inclusion. An open table, equality, ordination of those who are qualified and called, marriage of 2 adults, spirit-guided discernment and decision-making. That was what came out first. Very closely followed by social gospel, pursuing justice and peace, and advocating and welcoming and serving the marginalized, okay? So regarding the inclusion topic, did anyone vote for that because you think we need to share that more broadly? We need to do a better job of sharing that? That's probably the biggest we've seen so far of all these, okay? Did anyone vote for that because you thought we need to do a better job of defining that? A couple, okay. And did you vote for that because you thought we need to clarify some things around that? Okay, so the sharing of it, please, Kay, thank you. Likewise for the social gospel. Did you think that was important because we need to do a better job of sharing that's who we are? Quite a few, okay. Did you vote for that because you thought we need to define what that means for us? Yeah. Or did you vote for that because you thought we need to do a better job of clarifying what that means for us? And you don't have to remember like, well, I voted 2 days ago. Like if it means something to you now, that's fine, raise your hand, you know. But it looks like the sharing was again, what people are most concerned about for that. And then evangelization, sharing the good news and seeking and welcoming our neighbors and building up our beloved community. And ecclesiology, the role of the church, our role in the church, who we are versus who we are not. Okay. So as far as evangelization and spreading the news and seeking and welcoming neighbors and building up the beloved community, is that important to you because we need to do primarily a better job of sharing that? Or defining that? Or is there something that needs to be clarified with that? That's a pretty even split. Yeah. We'll have to have a broader conversation about that, I think, through those lenses. And then ecclesiology, the role of the church, our role in the church, who we are and who we are not. Is that important right now because we don't share that enough? We need to share it better? Or because we need to define it better? Or because we defined it, we need to clarify it somehow? Defining. Yeah. Thank you. Okay, then our last group then, about our communion. The top two people feel very strongly about, okay? So let's begin the conversation of what that means, why that matters, and why it needs to be an immediate term concern. So first, the synodal model, holy conversion, lay clergy dialogue, seeking consensus, discerning truth, establishing or clarifying relationships and needs and concerns. And by the way, when we work on these as tables, you'll have these definitions there written out, so you don't need to try to figure out what that means. So the synodal model, lay and clergy dialogue, consensus, discernment, the relationships, those sorts of things. Is that important because we need to primarily share it? Or define it? Or provide clarity around it? Clarity, it looks like, but we could probably have a little bit of conversation around defining it, perhaps. Or maybe that will lead to that. And then how we're called, that each local church is the body of Christ, living a common life in witness, liturgy, and service. So how we are called and how we are the body of Christ. Is that important right now because we need to share that better? Or define it better? Or clarify it better? I think on that sharing and clarification, we might have some questions that need to be answered, some conversation that needs to happen. And then the last two in this group, the old Catholic tradition and our relationship with the Declaration of Utrecht in 1889. Is that important? And if so, is it because we need to share better about that? You know, that we need to define anything better about that? Or that we need to provide some clarification around things around that, the clarification question, because people have a lot of questions or opinions or both. And then finally, the issue of apostolic succession, continuity personified in a bishop. Do we need to share that that's part of us better? Define that that's part of us better? Or clarify things about that, the clarification? Okay, great. And then, as I said, we all had opportunities to say, well, if these are not my issues, or if I have additional issues, these are some of the issues that I would like us to consider. Many of them really reiterated or more fully fleshed out some of the prior topics. And so when I go through, I will group them under those previous areas, and we can use those to flesh out our conversations. But then I also threw in some of the sample ones that were in there. A total of 33 additional priorities were included. Some of them included, and these are direct quotes, I'm just reading what people entered. acquiring property, especially cemeteries and missionary exploits globally, expectation of formation or education of clergy, and then included with that was seamless garment of life. I wouldn't interpret that as the same issue. I don't think that was the intent. There's a comma there. I think a discipleship or a catechumenate type program, I think it's supposed to say that points folks to mission. So formation. I would advise working with the next generation. We've heard this repeatedly this weekend. I would advise working with the next generation so that the innovations of up and coming pastors can help inform something. Us. Love, true love conquers all. As you wish. Need to allow for diversity in liturgy among communities, and we need to not deviate from general norms of liturgy in our communities. Those were both submitted. Our commitment to anti-racism and response to the climate crisis. We have 2 declarations about this from previous synods. Our statement about trusting individual conscience in matters of moral and ethical decision-making is unique and life-giving. Well said. Travel into the weeds to be ecumenical and allow non-ECC clergy to share the mat. What are our essentials? The organizational structure needs updating. And whether we are inclusive of poly relationships. Most of the others reiterated what was previously stated or fleshed them out a little bit more fully. This is just the statistic that for most people it was less than 2 minutes to maybe 7 minutes to complete the survey. Okay. Can I go back to anything for anyone as far as questions or you didn't catch something? Trish? All right, sorry.
Hi. I would just like to say that I struggled with some of the questions because some of them, none of them, it sometimes were my priority. Like at the end, people talked about climate. That would be the first thing I think I would put up there. And then anti-racism. I think those things are much more important than making sure everybody knows we're Trinitarian or that, you know, we have 7 sacraments. I mean, some of that just goes without saying. And I would suggest that we have this survey, but maybe that's not where we should go. I think there are some really pressing, important issues for the world, and that we can't be holding up, you know, about ecclesiology and ignoring those. Just my opinion.
Yo. Anything else? All right. Oh, yes, please.
I just want to tack on to what you just said. Just last night, I got an email from Diana Butler Bass. I don't know if any of you follow her spirituality or not. Yes. Okay. And in her email, she had that the ECLA bishops came out with a statement on truth. And I read that statement, and I think our community lacks in all those issues in coming out publicly with statements about issues that we really all feel strongly about, or maybe the majority feels strongly about, but that we're way, way behind the 8 ball on putting ourselves out there, which would also then bring attention to our communion and the good things that we do and stand for.
Awesome, thank you. Okay. Oh, do we have someone else? Yes, please.
I just want to piggyback on what the lady in front of me said. approximately half of the questions I look at and I go, if somebody was not a priest or a bishop, had not been raised from birth within the Catholic Church, do they care about these things? And the answer is no. They don't care about apostolic succession or this or the Utrecht thing or this or that. And if we want to bring those people to our table, to invite them to be part of our family, we have to answer the questions that they have, and we have to speak to them about what they care about, not what we may or may not care about.
Well, I really appreciate the, urgency and primacy of putting the climate and anti-racism in the front, but I guess I also think that embodying a Trinitarian spirituality is a deep way that we combat those things, and that we, that's for me, the biggest reason I'm a part of this church is because these sacraments and these spiritualities, in my opinion, are the way that we combat a lot of that. And so I hope that we can make sure that we're connecting those dots and not losing the tools that we have in front of us.
And I think this kind of follows on that, in that when I look at these questions, I kind of started sorting them into two buckets, and I'm like, this is important. Like, this is like foundational stuff that will allow us to function in a way that is healthy, but it's not what I'm going to talk about on, a bus stop with a stranger that they're like, well, what are you here for? I'm like, well, let me tell you about the Declaration of Utrecht. But it's important. And if I do find myself in a conversation with someone who is really steeped in the Roman Catholic tradition, and they're like, well, where's that? Like, how are you different? Then those are useful tools. And like the Trinitarian spirituality and the ecclesiology and how we relate to each other, like those are, like that's all stuff under the hood that if it's not like designed well, and if it's not maintained well and tended to, then you end up going 15 feet and 15 feet. And if you're lucky, you coast into a gas station where there are some friendly folks that help you out. If you're lucky, And so like there's two buckets. And maybe more, but there's at least two, like what is important under the hood. And like, that's part of what this meeting is for, is like, we are doing our annual checkup, or we're going into the mechanic and being like, there's this weird sound coming from the, and I don't know what it means, but let's like get under the hood. And then there's also like, what's the list of things that we really want to be like visible about, Like there's a reason why there's a hood on top of your car. No one wants to see your engine.
Well
Unless
said.
you're a nerd.
Thank you. Well said. Thank you.
I think John did a great job. I would have used the home renovation, the plumbing and the heating and everything, but most of those issues are encompassed under that social justice question. And just looking at the justice issues makes us advocates. They do not in and of themselves make us church. And so, yeah, I didn't like all of the things, and I quite frankly, I listed old Catholicity as pretty low, but we are church, and we're trying to explain how we are church and why we are church and what are our core beliefs. And once we understand why those are, then we understand our positions on the justice issues.
Thank you.
Yesterday in the House of Pastors, Trish made a comment that she thought that The next 5 years was critical for the ECC, and what I took away from her comment was that we need to solidify certain things within the next 5 years if we plan on continuing. And, you know, all these things in the survey, I think these are important things, but they're not the things that are keeping me awake at night. They're not the things that I'm worrying about. I'm worried about things like, where's the next generation of priests gonna come from, and how will they afford to have an education, and how can our very small communities support them? So I guess, you know, these questions in the survey, they're interesting, but is this really, would clarifying any of these things really make a difference of whether we're gonna be here in 5 years or not?
I think we also clarify things in our actions, right? And in our directions and what our priorities are, so that it is not only theoretical. And that's what we're trying to drill down to. Yes.
Okay. I found the survey much too corporate. I didn't like it personally. And I suppose it would have a different, a cradle Catholic. My wife is, I'm not. So I found some of the questions rather irrelevant to the core feeling of what we are about. We operate a little pantry when we feed the hungry. And I dare say that any these people are hungry. We attempt to meet their needs at that time. They're not interested in whether or not we should have communion, whether or not we should have confessions. We're trying to meet the needs of people. I've met a number of people that I express what we do in the ECC. I've never said any of those things that were on the survey. But I talked to them about equality. I talked to them about justice. I talked to them about acceptance. I talked to them about feeling welcome. And to me, this is what sets us aside from so many of the other religions. Because let's admit it, religion played a huge part in the ill treatment of so many people. When you take a look at this 1619 project, and you understand that there were churches who had people chained up in their basements. That was religion, folks, at that time. And so when I look at who we are, I bring it to the humanistic part of it. And everyone, I dare say that I express such warm feelings about the ECC and about Guardian Angels. Man, they were like, okay, where are you folks? And so we've had people come to us, and the thing they like about us is the welcoming. No one said, you know, you guys don't really follow the Roman Catholic tradition, and you should. We have a group of people who, years before, we cooked and prepared meals at the place called Pastor de Cristo. Pastor Cristo, I'm sorry. And Sue Ringler was such a huge part in developing this. Again, we're feeding people. We're meeting their needs. We're clothing people. We're giving, you know, I had a guy come up, ring the doorbell one night. And B said, who's at your door? Because I was in looking, the guy said, I opened the window and I said, yes. And he said, do you have a blanket? And I could tell he was a homeless guy. And I said, hold on a second. And he said, who's at the door? I said, it's a gal. What does he want? A blanket. She said, give it one. I said, okay. So it's these things. And I would tell you, I came to the table late in Catholicism. And I tried to understand and adapt to the Roman Catholics, and I just couldn't. I didn't believe in a religion that prohibit 50% of the population from approaching the pulpit. So I think if we are to do a survey that has meaning to us, not to discredit what was asked on this survey, but let's get the heart of it and talk about how many people have you fed this month? Do you believe we should feed more? How should we distribute food? Should we distribute money? Should we buy clothing? There's so many things that we could do as a church and as a religion that sets us apart from all of the pretenders out there, all of the money grabbers out there. And so we need to think about these things when we discuss why people don't come to church, why the young people don't come to church, et cetera, because it's more than theory that they're looking for. You know, it's the don't tell me about your gospel, show it to me.
I don't want to follow that, but I want to echo what Rosemary just said. From my perspective on the Leadership Council for so long, we are facing a crisis in terms of longevity, and we need to start talking about it. I don't think it's a crisis that has anything to do with what we believe. We've talked about what we believe at every synod. In the last 5 synods, I've given 3 talks, so I know we've done it. If nobody got up and ran out of the room yesterday when Chris was talking, there's a pretty big consensus about what we believe. That we are firmly entrenched in the mystical tradition of the Catholic Church. And like the reading this morning, we believe, like few in the world, that the light is in everybody. Every single person, not just those who believe, not that shows, those who say, you know, that they want atonement, every single person has the light. And we believe that. We've always believed that. And it's a minority view, and it's a gift to the world. And so that's the gift we're passing on. So, and we got to get down to the business of doing it. And it has to do with planning. It has to do with money. It has to do with putting churches together, maybe grouping resources. It has to do with maybe more lay leadership. It has to do with part-time pastoring models. It has to do with specific stuff like that. If some of our smaller communities are going to be with us in 5 to 10 years. So I don't think we need to talk about what we believe. I think we know what we believe. We all gave him a standing ovation yesterday. And he did it. He told it in a way that it's the best I've ever heard. And it's a gift to us. But it's now figuring out how to mechanically be community together in creative new ways. And that's what I want to talk about.
Thank you.
Still not working.
We'll bring this one back to you, Len.
Oh. One of the things that strikes me about the survey is going back, and I've heard from my community, is the whole sharing issue. That we need to let people know that we're here and what we're about. So I'm a Googler, so as soon as somebody brought up the ELCA's bishop's statement on emphasizing the need to speak the truth, Amy said to me, well, if we're so little, do people even know who we are? If our bishops said that, you know, and just issued another statement on that, they might not. But what if our bishops agreed today on at the urging of the community, if we all read this and said that we congratulate them on their courage of speaking the truth to power and revealing that lies and deception are not acceptable in the advancement of the human race. And they go on, and this is just inspired by the Holy Spirit. And I think it would do something to share and jump and augment. It would be in our ecumenical spirit. We don't have to come up with a new one, but we can certainly say, we endorse your divinely inspired words and want to live with them and look to a human community that lives under the umbrella of truth and not deception.
Yes, yeah. So Rob, I'm usually case sitting there with you up there. She's known me 47 years. I'm usually the idea person and the vision person, but I'm just thinking, you kind of got feedback on the survey. We've got a lot of strong feelings here. The social justice people, I've dedicated a lot of my time, my effort, my writing to those kinds of things. They're very powerful. They're life and death situations. I think that's what people in general in society really care about. We have a split nation going on with this election and all that. But back to the process. So I heard somebody say this, I hadn't heard it phrased that way, that we're about, as a communities, as churches, liturgy, witness, and service. I don't think this afternoon was designed to focus on liturgy. So maybe I'm trying to get to those two buckets. I think we can leave that aside for a bit. It's always integrated. I know that. It was a wonderful liturgy today. But about witness and service, I think we can focus on that in this time that we've set aside to be here. And the witness will bring us to the question of, I was with a consultant about a month ago in Santa Fe, and he talked about working with all these big companies. They come up with one priority. This is what we want. You know, I can't recall right now what all those priorities, because I'm not a corporate person. One line. And then that's what they went after, Nike, et cetera. And they were very successful. I'm not just looking for success, but I think as we focus on how do we want to share, so to use your language, share and define and clarify what we want to share, that will get us asking ourselves today, what do we want to share? Who are we? This brother over here just expressed the whole thing of the social witness and the social gospel. I'm totally with him in heart, but I know there's an institutional, organizational aspect to being church as well. And the other one, service, is so integrated to witness, to sharing, to advertising ourselves, so to speak, to others, that I think we need to narrow this down maybe in the time that we have today and focus in on something that has that integrated element. It's already there. Maybe it's witness. Maybe it's how do we share the gift of the ECC with the world at the same time that we do what this brother is saying. I believe everybody's going to go back and do service and social justice, and they're going to act boldly. But how do we want to integrate that? Is that what we want to lead with? We're not Nike, we're somebody else.
We have a comment here from someone online. It says, I found the survey very important for Africans to feel Catholic in the ECC and for non-Catholics to feel the presence of a stability in the recognition and embrace of a tradition. ECC is a denomination and not a philanthropic NGO that many Africans have lived through. Many are still steeped in the colonial religious trauma, and radical inclusive love of the ECC heals that. Is the ECC thinking of evangelizing Africa? Will French become a language? Will time become more sensitive? You need to scroll forward, please. Okay. Will it be up to Africans to bring themselves to the table, or will someone be sent?
I want to.
Yep.
I want to bring our attention to there seems to be a lot of consensus on a priority of issues, but I don't want us to forget the importance of the things that are not the priorities. On the ecumenical study group, it's very important for us to find out from everybody here who we are as church in respect to our ecclesiology and what we understand about the sacraments and about the Trinity. Because getting back to 3 is better than 1 or 2, we can do a lot more in the world, in our witness, through those ecumenical engagements and partnerships, whether it's be on the advocacy side or the charitable side. And those other churches, the Lutherans, the Episcopalians, who have you, the ecclesiology is important, and they want to know who we are in those terms. So I just encourage you not to throw that out and say it's not a priority for us, so we're not going to address it.
Okay, we're going to take a break soon.
I'm going to keep this real short because I'm new to what you're talking about. But I think what I'm hearing is that I agree with Michael. And it sounds like what he's talking about is what I'm familiar with in the corporate world is you have a manual. And the manual talks about, you know, what you stand for and the things you're talking about with ecclesiology. But what George was talking about, I think, is culture. And I think that everybody, I'm guessing, is pretty much on the same page as what the culture is and how people treat one another in the ECC, so that the expectations of a seeker who joins a community or checks out a community actually feels what you say you are. It can incorporate everything that John was talking about and the other service projects that people do. Our focus this year was the LGBTQ community. And so that's what I'm hearing, is that we need both and. We need to just be clear so everybody has a manual about what's ecclesiology and what's the culture.
Behind you, please. We'll take this comment and then we'll take a break, please.
Okay, I am a rookie too, and I agree with everything that has been said. And I'm going to use Mother Kay's phrase, and you just kind of used it too. I mean, I just said, she stole my word. Yes, but, or yes, and. Which one is better? Neither. It's both and, yes, and. So I think we need to let Rob go on with what he wants to do or what he had planned. And I bet you everything that is coming out in the room will come out on our papers. And that way we can get it down, we can get to a plan instead of just bouncing around the room. That's my.
Oh, thanks. Okay, that's a really good segue. The good news is that the survey is not about the survey. Purpose of the survey is to identify priorities, right? And so we have some very strong feelings about what the priorities are. And what we want to get to is some table conversations of let's write down 1 or 2 things that we think we need to prioritize and make progress on. Thank you. Thanks very much.
Maybe take a break first.
Yeah, this is, I'm introducing the break. So when we return from break, this is what I was going to say, we're going to have those specific conversations of what we think the priorities need to be. Please set your timer for 10 minutes so we can have time to do that. Thank you. The year 2025, we need to make progress on this specific issue in these recommended specific ways. Okay? And then hopefully we'll have some time for some reporting out. We'll stick them around. Oh, there's my lovely family. Ah. And then hopefully we'll have some time for some reporting out and sharing. Certainly there will be some crossover between them. And then that information will be submitted. And plans and timelines will be established. Are there any questions about the process for right now? If we could keep it quiet for a couple more minutes, there's a question about the process, please.
I'm sorry, but it's not a question about the process. This is really not a question about the process. I apologize. It's a question I wanted to ask earlier, if I may, and it has to do with the foundation, the very basic foundation of who we are. And it's yesterday, Chris in his talk said Merton and Ronner said the same thing. And this goes below all the issues we've been discussing, I think. It has to do with the Christian of the future will be a mystic or not a Christian at all. And I'm wondering if we might consider how we can become more deeply in relationship with God on the mystic side, and possibly everything else will fall into place.
Sounds like a great suggestion. Thank you. All right, any questions online? We seem to be okay there. We're going to do breakout rooms online. And we will talk again in 30 minutes.
Just to help, Deacon Bass was telling the group about, and as well as Peter was telling the group about their experience in Africa, how different it is, the churches, and what their needs are, which is very different than what our focus is here in the States. A lot of things are attracting people to, for example, the ECC is not as easy. Church structure is not similar as Deacon Bess was, before we got cut off, Deacon Bess was just kind of going through that experience in terms of having to be licensed literally under another church to be recognized corporately before she can even do work. So it's a very different experience.
Yeah, I don't know how to think about international ECC things.
Right.
That's bigger than my brain is, so that's good.
And the kinds of priorities that people have been expressing have been very intimate, and so very local, very close to the individual, and so naturally really kind of subconsciously but strongly shaped by culture. And this American structure that we live in. So how to think about that on a global level and to take away those that kind of cultural constraint. It's difficult. Hard to think about.
Interesting.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, what I appreciated about what Deacon Bess and Peter had to say is that their concerns really aren't just local to Africa, but really are, I think, relevant for the future of the church. I hear in their descriptions that it's really necessary to maintain the church as a corporate entity, and to do so requires resources, and not just money, but property, space, so that you can get people committed in the long term. Both of them spoke about everyone wanting goodies as individuals, and they've been servicing people as individuals, but it's very difficult to get those individuals to join up and to commit for the long term. And I think so. Their concerns are very pragmatic, and I think apply in all different contexts. And it's connected to what the larger group brought up, was the institutional part of all of this, right? How do we get people to kind of really understand what the institution is about, and to be willing to join up and to contribute on a regular basis to making sure that the church can thrive.
So do we want to make that one of the priorities then? Is does it rise to that? One of the other interesting things about that is my understanding of in the United States about ECC is like our parish nests inside of another parish, and we were told we're not allowed to have we weren't allowed to have property. So if Deacon Bess, I know I see you're on the call, if you're required to have property, then those are diametrically opposed to each other. So.
Yeah, so Paul, I think, certainly as Elizabeth is highlighting, the cultures are different, and consequently the needs are different. And so the structures have to be different to meet the local community. And that's, at least that's my takeaway from what Deacon Bess has shared, as well as Peter. I work very closely with the Polish community. We have a small Benedictine community in Poland with the Reformed Catholic Church there under Bishop Tomas. And there are legal issues that are very different there than they are here, that have to be respected. But we have, full communion with Poland. So a lot of things are basically, we hold each other's hand as we work through some of these issues. Some are easier than others. But Poland is not the US, and the government in the US is not Poland's government.
Right.
Okay. And I would imagine the same would be true for Cameroon.
I wonder if there are priorities that supersede the cultural, legal needs of the different churches or constraints of the different churches. If we have, just looking at this group's 2 priorities, we should proclaim that God is in all things and all people. Is that a priority that can be held as a priority across the ECC, but manifest differently according to those other constraints that that influence a community?
Yeah.
So we're looking, yeah.
I agree. I feel like some of the things are really head-centered things, and a lot of the things in the survey felt very head-centered and studied or legalistic or head-centered parts of being churches, which is important. We need to understand that. But I feel like the unity is in the heart-centered part of being church. How we
you can throw it on the wall if you like.
Okay.
I think we're done.
Ugh.
I think every
All
time I.
right, let's process this and share, please. We're closing on 4 o'clock, which means we have approximately 2 minutes per table to explain your priorities. I'm going to keep saying this because I know everybody's still talking. Thank you very much. I have some important instructions for folks if they wouldn't mind listening too much to them. So we're going to regroup and share. There we go. Hello. All right, so we're closing in on 4 o'clock, which means we have approximately 2 minutes per table for you to share your wonderful wisdom. And one person can throw it up on the wall and one person can briefly explain it. This table had theirs up first. Let's hear what your priorities are, please. And let's show everyone some respect. Thank you.
Okay, so our table wanted to look at issues we felt were important in our communion. One is the infrastructure, not the general overview structure of the ECC, but what's happening underneath, the diocese versus regions versus whatever's. This is supposed to say that covenantal relationships are important. We felt that prompt and bold responses to world issues were important. And by bold, we mean putting it in social media. You know, it doesn't have to be letters. It can just be statements. But getting it out to young people. So that means in social media as well as written media. And we felt that emphasizing a future-focused ecclesiology was very important. Our ecclesiology is there. It has been explained to all of us. I think we should by now understand, as George said, but we no longer want to look backwards. We want to look forwards.
All
So
right.
skip the rest.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. 1 second. Can we have someone from the group that put one up here come forward, please, and describe in 2 minutes or less what your top priorities are? Oh, this is going to be in stereo. Awesome.
We're running a special 2 for the price of 1. So first of all, we mentioned in the focus on outreach, marketing, getting the torch out, which is very important. Marketing to youth in alternative methods and adopting modern media methods, because our outreach, you know, that marketing, we do not have a whole lot of money for marketing. It would be great, but how can we think of outside the box to do creative marketing that is relatively inexpensive, not only for the entire communion, but in our individual communities as well?
Another issue that we identified was service to the critical needs of the community. One thing that's always stuck with me is people will look at what you're doing and your actions, not what you're saying. So not only as a communion, but as a community, to be out there doing the dirty work. Yeah. Joining, collaborating, linking with local churches, agencies, nonprofits, and service organizations to serve the local community. The more you're out there and the more that you say who you are, people will start to recognize your name and know that you are doing something to make this community better. And that was very important to us. Pablo said, you know, look for the doers, and that's what we need to do. And another thing that we also came, because it was a big concern about continuity in the community and in our, you know, in the whole communion and in our community, was developing leadership programs. Henry brought up a good point, and so did Pablo, is a lot of our current priests were trained in the Roman Catholic Church, got their Masters of Divinity, and then came to us or went to other organizations. Our youth or young adults who may be thinking about going into the ministry, not necessarily can afford to go through school all those years to attain a Master's of Divinity degree. Do we develop mentorship programs? Where I said to Henry, like, what if I came to him and said, Henry, I'm thinking about being a priest in the ECC. I'm not, it's just hypothetical. Can I shadow him for a year? Can I watch him for a year to see if this is what I really want to do? And, you know, if there are youth that come to us and express that interest, do we develop those programs that, you know, we can do and maybe help guide them on the path, get the funds they need, and hope they bring their gifts back to us. It was very important.
And that really speaks to passing the torch as well. Thank you.
Yeah. One other thing Pablo brought up is, how do we develop our statutes, policies, procedures where they're lacking in structural development to ensure continuity? He was referring to what happened in the Midwest and in California. You know, there were things there that happened that there was no answers for. And those are things we have to discuss at some point to make sure we're continuing to grow and exist.
Thank you very much. All right, let's hear it. Yeah, we have somebody here, and then there was one deposited here. We'll do that next, okay? Go ahead, please. Yep, we could.
Okay. Who's the timer? I'll watch you.
All right, so do we have a timer?
Okay. Engagement of the local community with the communion. We identified that our community is just not as informed about the communion. And I love the term, the covenanted communities. So we're going to bring that back home. And that's our responsibilities as members of the ECC, to really bring it home to our communities. Our other one was, you know, reimagining the Eucharist, outdoor masses, retreats, taizé services, different ways. Our basis is our theology, our ecclesiology, but how can we reimagine that to really reach out to other people?
Nice.
I'm studying to be a deacon at Mary Magdalene Church in East Rochester, and I will tell you the idea of meeting people where they are on the streets. And when it's John, isn't it? When you spoke about that. So one of the things I think that's important is that we raise up the diaconate in the ECC, because our role is to bring the church to the people and the people to the church. And we need those individuals to work at their ordinational vows, their vows to do this with the church. And I think as an ECC, I'm hoping to get better connected with the deacons here, but we should individually be thinking about the diaconate's role in raising the church out to the community and bringing those people into the church. And that means we're on the streets, we're out there where they are. There's our social work that we talked about. And finally, along with everyone else, we need better social media outreach to the young people. I know nothing about how to do that, but we as a communion ought to have some brains that know how to do that. And let's really help each other learn how to do that in our own individual communities. So that's what we came up with.
Awesome. Thank you. Take it away.
So we have three. The first is kind of easy because it's just work. We have to get back to being connected and accountable. And the accountability thing is we got to make sure all our clergy are accountable to a corporate entity again. We've kind of lost some of that. We got to make sure every entity has insurance, every entity has a budget. Every entity isn't a sham corporation for liability purposes. We got to clean this stuff up. It's doable. It's going to take some work, but if everybody cooperates, we can make that happen and make sure our documents are consistent, that we don't have some parish documents that are inconsistent with the ECC documents. Just work, but it needs to be done. We got to get our theology out there. incredible theology. On our website, if you want to look at one example, we have 3 paragraphs that tries to summarize the mystical way. No pride in authorship. Check it out. Put something on your website that says, we look at God differently than the people down the street. We think the light is in everyone. And that's crazy unique. And lastly, we got to get up to date technically. It's already been said. We think Charis is like way ahead of us. We're all trying to learn from what they're doing, and we're trying to steal from them. So hopefully I'll give them a call or whatever, but we got to learn how to attract people online, because that's where this is all headed.
Nice. 30 seconds to spare. Way to go. I think after Marissa speaks, then we'll go to Team Zoom too. Let's not forget Team Zoom's on the line. So we got 2 more and then we'll go to Zoom. Go right ahead, please.
We put as number 1, timely leadership statements from our bishops on current issues. I want to commend our bishops for their statement on Gaza. It was lovely. It gave me something to hand to people in my life to say, here's how my church is thinking about this. How's your church thinking about it? Those kinds of things are important. Or, endorsing other good statements. A letter that says we endorse this would be wonderful. And then our second thing was an actionable plan on community transitions for whatever leadership in our communities are going to look like in the next handful of years. Other side of our table.
Our first one is to have a clear idea and plan to sustainably and reasonably grow churches. Hopefully, to include ways to share ideas across geographic regions more effectively. And secondly, to achieve adherence to constitutional requirements for clergy to have safe church, healthy boundary, recurring education. And guess what, Rob? We put in a step for this. Yes! The first step, we think, because the OPB is required by the Constitution to approve whatever course is going to be offered or taken, is to appoint a group to explore the matter and make recommendations to the OPB.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Awesome, awesome, awesome. We have Carolyn Sue standing in this corner. She was kind enough to put Team Zoom's on some paper and throw it on the wall. And what does Team Zoom have to say, please?
Team Zoom says, we should proclaim that God is in all things and all people, and therefore all are welcome, and it all is encircled with love. And then they said, we are to live the glad tidings, the good news, the gospel by service to others.
Awesome. Thank you, Team Zoom. If anybody wants to come off mute and we do. Oh, we do. Okay. Are we switching sides now?
Okay, so we stole some ideas and words that we heard or expressions, and we really like them. So what we suggest is starting with a project. Passing the torch should be a project with a project manager, a project group, everything that corporations do to achieve a goal. So we believe it should be a project, first of all. And we also put all those things that we have been talking and other groups have been talking into 3 different buckets that we believe we can work on this one first separately, this one and that one, and then come together as one project, because these are different things, but under one project, our concern should find the right bucket. And I'm gonna pass the torch to you right now.
So we have 3 buckets. The first one we called the draw. That's where the social justice work and the welcoming activities and the inviting people in takes place, and where we go out in the world and be where people are. That is our user interface. This bucket here is the under the hood stuff. It's our core identities and our core processes, and basically getting all of our organizational ducks in a row so that we have structure and we have process to pass down. That's our internal processor. This is outreach, and that goes beyond just being social justice in the world. It goes into basically doing market research, finding out what do young people want? What do young people need? What needs do they have that are not being met? And can we as church meet those needs? And also think about other people whose needs are not being met within the existing church structures. Not just ours, but everybody's.
And that's called which?
That we called this one outreach. It's our user acquisition and market research bucket.
It's incredibly creative. Thank you very much. Let's hear it for them. Way to go, team. All right, we have Linda.
Yes.
All right.
All right. In terms of passing the torch, one thing that we identify as important is working to create this. This already exists, but it seems latent, although I'm really encouraged by hearing it in others, is creating a culture of contemplative discernment grounded in listening to Sophia or wisdom.
Oh.
That is a gift that is, I think, I'm still dipping my toes in. It's unique here, right? It is in the gospel, it is in the Christian history, but I have so rarely seen it, let alone experienced it. And I think if this community loses that, you're not passing the torch, right? Yeah. Second is, and I think we've heard pieces of this already, is people are amazed at what all of you are doing. And why not, or finding ways to communicate that more regularly and in an active way, so that communities, each of your communities, can access a resource pool that is available online. I have to excuse my scribbling here, where ECC participants and ministries offer themselves as subject matter experts in support of social justice outreach and ministries, so that we're not all inventing the wheel each time we come up with an idea, that there's a place that we can go to and say, oh, we can contact that community because they've done this. And there could be some consulting going on.
Very nice. Thank you very much.
Okay, I'm gonna make this quick because we basically agree with all of you all.
Okay,
it's
great.
important to fix what's under the hood, get all our infrastructure taken care of. The other thing that's, I think, deeply important is developing a community. Being accountable, George said it, being accountable, that not 2 years isn't enough to get to know somebody, but growing our relationships through the House of Pastors and the House of Laity, and maybe even group meetings that allow us to grow and know each other beyond just once every 2 years.
Yep. Thank you so much. Okay.
Yeah, our group went to this idea, and we've talked about it before, and Bishop Francis is still in the room. When I was working with the Bishop Peter, and during that time, for Francis, for a while, we had a consultant, right? I think that's what we're talking about. I recently was with a consultant with the Ministerial Alliance in Santa Fe. And this man came and he worked with some of the largest companies in the United States and made a presentation to us. But the essence of it was, you can do it, but Nike and some of these other people, they decided from the corporate level, I suppose Rob could help with that. You get from your feedback, your ideas, your vision, and then you get a branding of some kind. And it's in one sentence, or the ones. I can't remember them because I don't remember those clever. Just
like
do it.
Tagline.
Just do it, Rob. That's it. What is it called?
It's called a tagline.
Tagline. Okay, that's it. And then, like others have said, get that out to where the needs are with younger people and other people that feel disillusioned or disenchanted with their religion or Catholicism. Form partnerships. Somebody said this earlier. I don't know if it was Michael Nicosia or somebody, but you have to form relationships, and that could be with a social organization as well as with a church. Okay?
Yes.
And the third one is then we're doing this, so we have to share our culture, who we are, our liturgy, our witness, our service. We're inviting you to our table, come and be with us. And then that helps the top two work together.
Such good thought going into all of these. Thank you very much. Thank you.
So we were just talking about building relationships, and you mentioned Michael Nicosia. Well, I was in Michael's group, and so we have building relationships in our group. And what we're talking about is ecclesiology and evangelism, right? Knowing who we are and being able to communicate that to others within the communion, within our communities, and also outside the other churches. And so we wanted to be able to look at media connections and how we can connect, and we can do that as a full communion, as well as individual communities. And we also spoke about our Zoom calls. I don't know about your regions, but in my region, when we have our Zoom calls, most of the time, the people that are on the call are leaders. If we have the whole community involved in the Zoom calls, we can connect in many different ways and build those relationships and leverage those relationships, which will allow us to go from who we are to now what we do. And what we do is reaching out to others in social justice, in collaborating with others, sharing our best practices. One community might say, hey, this is what we do to feed our homeless. This is how we can provide cooling stations. And there are different ways in which we can communicate and share what works for us so that others can take those ideas, put them into practice, and reach out in social justice. The next thing is empowering our youth, engaging them. We have in my community a lot of real small kids running around, and we've been able to engage them and empower them. We had them making sandwiches to give to the homeless. We had them packing bags. We have one of them doing bags for tampons.
All right.
Good.
This is great stuff. All great stuff. Thank you, Ed. Thank you, team. Where are we going next? Let's hear it for him.
Okay, our table right here, we talked about taking a look at the roots of our tradition and how we would innovate them for our modern age. I think a way to sum it up is how do we look at like major categories of our faith, like reconciliation, Eucharist, Christian spirituality, care for creation, and how do we apply a lens that we need today of right relationship and growing our soul. So we talked about like, what would it look like to be doing reconciliation now, you know, and how do we tend the grief of our own communities together? We talked about different ways that, you know, Christian spirituality might look for us today in terms of uplifting contemplative practices, having available spiritual direction, and listening to youth and how to connect with them in ways that actually make sense to them and engage with them and are what they're looking for and that they want. We talked about how the Eucharist, how we might bring that out of a ritual space into a way of living with each other that is participating in meals and sacred meals. And what does that mean? What does it mean to have a sacred meal? Like thinking about how we're sourcing food, who's growing the food, and all those things that would need to be involved with that. And yeah, I think that is most of it.
It's an explosion of creativity. Thank you very much. Where are we going? Yeah.
It's fun to be last. Yes.
You're not last. You're not last.
Second to the last, okay. Almost. We focused on things that we thought could be done at the cooperative level, the national level, if you will, and topics that needed discussion and then would have impact on us all. So exploring obviously the next generation of clergy and the options for affordable education, are there models that we could discover and share beyond what we've discovered so far? And when we find out things, can we get the word out to people elsewhere? Exploring models for part-time bivocational ministry. Again, ideas are there. Let's communicate them, but we also need to come up with some ideas. Ecclesiology came up on our table too. I liked the statement on the other side about continuities or filling in some of the gaps. What we wrote down was there are tensions in our ecclesiology that have not been resolved and maybe can't be resolved, but we need to look at them and understand them. One of those would be between obviously the congregational model with which we are legally constituted and then the question of bishops and regions and dioceses. We need to know where we are on that. I think that's for answering the question, who are we, when other groups talk to us and other independent Catholic groups talk to us and say, do we want to join you? What would that mean? I don't think all our growth will be individuals walking in. We might have whole churches walking in, but we have to answer some questions for them. And money, dollar signs next to all of this, and the question of growth was the elephant in the room for us, but we tried to be more specific on first steps and some teams that might be created to talk about these questions.
On our table, we followed most people's kind of general sense of we had a structural one and a growth one. And it really set me up. So on the structural one, we were kind of, what we started with was the question of like, why does no one want to serve in leadership, right? Because for those of us who were in House of Pastors, House of Laity, we didn't have a lot of nominations. In fact, we're lacking a House of Laity vice president right now, right? And that's something that like, why does no one want to serve? And I think there's probably a million answers to that, but I think we connected that to kind of lay empowerment. And I think that there's, as we were talking about the congregational versus, Episcopal versus presbyteral, whatever model, it's I think our Constitution is very lay empowering. I think we still overwhelmingly grew up in the Roman Catholic Church, and we default to priests and we default to bishops. And so maybe there's something to do with, maybe we need to look at like a constitutional amendment to really clarify that priority, that governance in terms of lay empowerment. And I think that was where we kind of came to on that. One minute. And the other one was another kind of three random stuff together, but identify our audience, I think, was the key, right? If we're trying to grow, who are we trying to grow to? It's been ex-Catholics, right? That's kind of our group, our disaffected Vatican II Catholics. Me too. And that's who, if that is, or is it someone else? Is there someone that we want to look beyond that wasn't Catholic, didn't grow up Catholic, whatever? And I think social justice has a big part of that. We've talked a lot about that. And going to the margins. But then also I think the last part of the ex-Catholic is when do we reach out to someone, right? Because I kind of see this model. We thought when Caris was founded, we would grow to 300 members overnight because there's so many ex-Catholics out there. Who's not going to want to join this? This is great. It's inclusive. But I think there's a certain sense where it starts going, people are disaffected or there's dissonance. And then by the time they're ready to look at ECC, they've already kind of given up on religion in general. So when do we grab them? How do we reach them before they've completely given up on religion?
All right, I think we have one more report near the back of the room, please.
Yeah, this is Mary Magdala, Fort Collins. We didn't get ours on a big piece of paper, but we thought that the important thing is right in our community, in our communities, to be sure that anybody who comes to get involved with what their needs are and wants, and to the point of going to their home, offering to go to their homes and answer questions that they have. Make them, if your heart opens up to other people, it's going to come across to them. Anyway, let's see. Another idea in this is through, Facebook and social media, but also newspapers, anywhere that you can get any visibility with newspapers, interviews that and be able to welcome people to come. Just come and see us, you might love it. Actually, I was wondering how many churches here that you are in are a part of another church. If you're renting from another church or something, lots of people. Do you have a covenant with those people also? Mary of Magdala, that we are 3 churches all together under one roof. We have a covenant with the other 2. We all pitch in with money. But it's a beautiful arrangement, because partly at least because we do share community liturgies every 3 months, is it about? And our children have been invited to do the little ones and the teens to do the activities with them. And the one last thing, it says would like
Okay.
the national to develop a survey so that we can understand what people want, other than us guessing what people want.
Okay, thank you very much. Behold the work of your hands.
One more. We have Tempe
So
and
there's always
Tempe, Arizona and
an
Spokane,
encore.
Washington. Sorry.
the encore.
Okay. Really quickly, because they've been talked about anyway. 1, qualifications for diaconate and priesthood need to be made appropriate for our church today. And 2, create a network between communities to share what they are doing to address the needs of children via formation, via their welfare, or et cetera. Something that might be on the main ECC website that we could network and grab off of the website.
Thank you very much. All right, now behold the work of your hands and give yourselves another round of applause. Next steps, these will be collected, cataloged, categorized, and submitted to the leaders, House Lady, House Pastors, Council of Bishops. And by the end of this year, we're at the middle of October now, by the end of this year, we will have plans, structures in place for 2025, for which of these we will be pursuing, progressing, and making progress on. So thank you very much for all of your work. I'd like to invite you to stand to the degree that you are able and willing to do so, and offer up your hands to the degree that you are able and willing to do so, and offer up your work with this closing prayer. Gracious and holy God, as we continue our discernment as a community, grant us the intellect to understand, reason to discern, the diligence to seek you, wisdom to find you, a spirit to know your ways, and a heart to meditate upon them. May our ears hear you, may our eyes behold you, and may our tongues proclaim you. Give us grace that our way of life may be pleasing to you, that we may have the patience to wait for and the perseverance to look for you. And grant us the joy of finding you every day in everyone. And we ask this through Jesus Christ, our Redeemer. Let us all say, amen. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, everybody. As you probably know, or maybe don't know, Rob is gonna leave right now to get to the airport, hopefully in time to catch his plane back. So he was here for a couple of days. Thank you very much for your work on this, Rob. Thank you, your great spirits. And Blessings, blessings. And may your favorite team, the Dodgers, win.